tell us a little bit about yourself, whatever you think is pertinent to the matter at
Right,
hand, and about what you got into, and I guess how you got into it.
right. Well, trying to make this short as possible, but can't sum up everything so concisely as much as the instant gratification crowd would like. Um, so my name is Andrew Hershkowitz. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, in what most people would call a modern Orthodox family. Kept Shabbat, kept kosher, went to modern Orthodox yeshiva, was co-ed, yeshiva of Flatbush. Um, all my religious affiliation was a little odd. I like to explain to people that I'm very grateful that I grew up in a family where it was throughout the entire spectrum. I'm very close to my cousins. So I had one cousin who people consider black cat, Hasidish. One cousin who was more like yeshivish, but not really, like more in the culture, under like isn't in that bubble. Then I had my family where my mom kept Shabbat, kept kosher. My dad kind of like put on a show in a way. Like we would take us to shul, he would do Shabbat dinner with us, but like after Shabbat, like the mouse would be in a different spot, or when we'd be VCRing something back in the day, like during the commercial, we'd go into the basketball game. And then I had other cousins who were completely secular, and I was exposed to all of that. And I'm very grateful for that because the biggest fights my dad had with his dad were about religion. He didn't want to have that with us, so he showed us and then let us make our own decision. And for me, my path was always, like, I don't know, is the Torah real? I don't know, but I know God is real. Like the neshama within me, that is coded in every human being that we look up when we're brought into this world, that was within me. There's no way the world was created by itself. There's no way that there's no meaning to this life. There's no way that there aren't consequences for our actions. There's no way that the Jews just survived all the persecutions from both the far left and the far right throughout history. The only thing a neo-Nazi and an Antifa person can agree on is they hate Israel and hate the Jews. None of this is a coincidence. But I wasn't really observant. Um, what I really wanted to do was work in sports my entire life. That's all I ever wanted to do. And thank God, through the grace of God and through my hard work, I was able to accomplish that goal. I worked at Sports Illustrated. I worked at Bleacher Report. I was the encyclopedia with sports. But within that time frame, I came to realize that what my real purpose was that to be able to use the skills I gained working in sports, whether it's content creation through video, through audio, through writing, graphics, in order to amplify a message that is more important than men playing with a ball, and that is Torah and Hashem. And like that doesn't come from a place of like quote unquote faith where it's like, oh, I just think it. No, like I was exposed to certain ideas and concepts that for me, like it's not even about believing. It's really more about like knowing and living life, understanding that God is real and God is good, and that the Torah is of divine origin, because it can be proven to an extent as anything can be proven in today's day and age, which we could get into a whole different thing. But yeah.
The last note that you mentioned about it's not really about believing; it's about knowing. So somehow I feel like that's a recurring theme in a lot of my conversations. But I really think, on a certain level, the only thing you have to believe is that your experience is valid. Like it's about
Yeah,
experiencing,
that
and then you have to believe your experience is valid. And that's, you ever heard Sam Harris talk about consciousness? Because he's like, consciousness is the only thing we know, because whatever this is, it is.
Right, right. And a thing is you can't describe a thing except the thing in itself. But it's interesting that you talk about Sam Harris and consciousness, because most atheists don't really want to talk about consciousness, because that's the question they can't answer, which is like, where did consciousness come from? And they don't really have an answer for it, which is why I find very interesting that he's very into meditation and things like that. Um, but yeah, it is. Our experiences are important and they are valid. The problem comes when, and this gets into more postmodernist ideas, where it's like, I have my experience, you have your experience, and I can't possibly understand your experience at all, and you can't understand my experience at all. You have your truth, I have my truth, and in essence, by saying that, there is no objectivity and there is no truth, because truth is inherently objective. And that's what we're seeing today with this chaotic world that we live in, where no one knows something as simple as like, what is a man and what is a woman, right? Like even something like that, we you can't have a direct objective answer on that, because I have my truth and you have
Right.
yours.
I had this interesting, like, I guess, epiphany during the Passover Seder over Pesach this year when it got to the four sons. So the Haggadah talks about the wise son, the wicked son, the simple son, and the son who doesn't know how to ask. And when it gets to the wicked son, it says, "What does he ask? Maha eidos hazos lachem. What is this? What are these commandments to you?" And we say "Ulefi shahotzeitz atzmo min haklal," because he removed himself from the equation. Kafar be'ikr. He rejected like the most integral part of everything. So I was wondering, like I was thinking about it, like in theory, yes, he removed himself from the equation. He asked us, like, what does it mean to us? But that means he suddenly doesn't believe in anything? How does that imply he doesn't believe in anything?
I think what it means is that he just only believes in himself, right? Like he's removing himself from the group, which, you are supposed to do to a degree. But at the same time, we also understand that, of course, individuality reigns supreme. It starts first. But if you're just an individual, if in Kishinet, what's the famous thing? Kishani latzmi ma'ani, right? If all you're talking about is yourself and you're only for yourself, then what are you really? And that's maybe kind of what he's doing there, where he's like, what is this to you? This isn't for me. All I am is me. And no one else matters. And it's like, no, of course, the individual matters first. Paramount importance. But if all you're doing is caring about yourself and you don't realize that there are 7 billion other people that have that exact experience that you do, right? Which is funny because we just spoke about the dangers of not knowing that the 7 billion different experiences aren't actually part of a unified whole, right? Because we all share the human experience, but though we have different experiences within that experience, if you lose that perspective, then you're really nothing more than, almost like an animal, right? It's sad. It's a sad existence.
Yeah, that's definitely that's definitely a good shot. And what I was thinking might be like I might be kind of trying to squeeze it in a little more to the words, but I still think that the concept was really funny. I was thinking about it like kind of like New Agey, like he's asking, "What does Judaism mean to you?" As if in Hotzi Atzmo in Aklal, he's moving himself from like objectivity. He's saying in its essence, it doesn't really have anything, and it's just like, what does it mean to you?
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that's you're denying like objective reality. You're kafar be'ikr. Right. You're saying that things don't have their own essence. It's only how I relate to it. Right. And then what do we answer him? We answer him, if you were there, you wouldn't have been saved, because if you want to see reality like that, that's how reality interacts with you.
Right, yeah. It's you create your own reality in a way.
So if in your reality, you're right. In your reality, there is no objective reality. But I think the OG spiritual traditions are all saying that there is an objective reality, and we're all just looking at it subjectively.
Right, exactly, and it's interesting. I had a friend recently who was going through a really hard time, and he started like denying free will. He was saying we don't have free will.
It's a really complicated one.
It isn't. It's also not. But he kept denying free will, and I kept trying to talk to him about it, and because I saw the dangers in it and what can happen if you deny your free will. It's horrifying what can happen. And it was fun. And Z was probably gonna come on soon. He was there, and he made the point, and I was like, I should have thought of it. And he's right. He's like, well, we'll call this friend Joseph or something, right? Like, he's like, Joseph, if you say you don't have free will, I believe you. You don't have free will, but it's because you are saying you don't have free will. But you don't get to tell me that I don't have free will. Yeah, you don't have free will because you are creating a reality in which you don't have free will. And I actually went to go visit him yesterday because he was in the hospital for a while, and now he's back, and he's realizing the fault of his actions. He made the choice to deny his free will.
Can I trip you out for a second?
Yeah,
I had this discussion with someone from Scranton, Pennsylvania, like a neighbor of mine down the block. He's a real like holy man. He knows like an insane amount of Torah, and I love going over whenever I'm back by my parents, by my family in Scranton. I'll go over just to chat with him. Really sweet guy, Rabbi Herber, Ta Herber, that's what I call him, and. He told me there's actually one of the Rishonim, one of like the earlier Jewish commentaries, who says there's no such thing as free will.
And what is it? Well,
Rabbeinu
so
Hershkowitz is he says the only freedom we have kind of is how we interpret what happens in hindsight. But like whatever you're gonna do is whatever you're gonna do, and then how do you take it? It didn't make any sense to me. Once again, it doesn't. I'm just saying, like for me, it was too much. But what I find within Judaism is people don't understand like the broad spectrum of Jewish thought and opinions, and there's really a place for every opinion. Like you know what? If your friend really believes there's no such thing as free will, I think like you should look in the Torah, and try to prove it to me.
Right. No,
in like a weird way.
And I did, and so there's a lot of stuff there, and some of the where I think that your rabbi friend or whatever title you want to give him, what he's saying, more from what I'm understanding, is the famous paradox, right? Of like, how can we have free will and God know the future, right? And there's the famous thing, kol b'yedei shamayim chutz mi'irat shamayim, right? Everything is in the hand of God, aside from, I'm not even going to use the word fear because yirah is not really fear, but the awe of heaven, right? Then, and to understand the awe of God, that's not in the hands of God, that is free choice. And it's an interesting idea. When you look at the Tetragrammaton, God's famous name, the timeless name, the infinite name of God, which is translated in English as, I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to say it anymore, but like Jehovah or Jah or things like that, where all these other cultures get the name of God from. The reason why it's that is because Yod Kei Vav Kei houses all the tenses, right? Because you have the word Yehiya in there, you have the word Hoveh in there, the word Haya in there, showing that God is infinite. And what's interesting is what's the first symbol of God's name is a Yud, meaning Yehiya is first. So if you are an infinite creator, what do you do first? First, you create all possibility, right? You create all possibility, and you account for all possibility. So if someone on the chessboard makes a certain choice, that I can then account for that and make this move, make that move to ensure that outcome. And I knew the outcome from beforehand, even if the person, the person on the chessboard made the move. And that's why our free choice has such power, because when we make choices, we actually destroy worlds. We destroy possibility, and we create possibility. And then you get into the whole scientific aspects in quantum mechanics, that possibility is reality, and that thought actually is physical in a way. That just our eyes are incapable of seeing it because we can only see less than like 1% of the light spectrum. That what our thoughts are really creating around us, we don't really know. So I'm not sure. Maybe this isn't what your rabbi friend was saying, but Rabbi Herber, you said?
Herber, yeah.
But
he was just bringing down from whatever he's shown him. That's it.
Right. I mean, I would like to get if you can ask him like a better, a more concrete.
He showed it to me inside. We like learned it a little bit. Rabbeinu Hershkowitz, I believe, was who it was, and I didn't really get what he was saying. But what I was just trying to say is the way you kind of said that for you, like, God is not a question, the divine is not a question. Right. It's just kind of after that. I think there's a place in Judaism for people who believe in this divine whatever, and you know what happens after that? Come to the table, come to the base medrash, let's fight it out. You know what I mean? But it's not that what we perceive to be like clear cut like Jewish opinions. The Maimonides points out, the Rambam points out, there's no such thing as a psak in machlokes and metzias. So
translate that.
There is no such thing as a definitive rabbinic ruling as far as a question regarding reality. Reality is. We don't get to rule on what reality is. Either there is free will, there isn't free will. We can come, we can discuss it, we can debate it. It just is or isn't. There's no
objectivity doesn't change. Right. And this is the craziest thing. This is why, because we live in a world where the objective is being destroyed more and more each and every day. And it's interesting because I think most people, there's a high correlation between people that deny objective reality and God. But not everyone. There are people that say, I believe in God, but I don't believe there's objective reality. And what they don't really understand is that that's impossible, because they don't really know what God means. So like the allegory I like
thinking
to
of God
give
as an entity more.
Right. Exactly. Instead of a principle, or both, because God's both, and that's the paradox.
Right.
But so the famous allegory that I give, I mean, I'm not saying I made it famous, but I think most people have heard this, is that there's three stories. There's my story, there's your story, and there's the truth in between, right? And what is that truth in between? So the truth in between. So let's say we have an interaction with one another. I say that you hit me, and you say that it was in self-defense.
Right.
And what is the only truth in the middle that the arbiter could decide what is actual truth there? It would have to be something or someone that encompasses all space, both externally and internally, meaning it's surrounding every area at that moment, but also was with each person in their thoughts, in their actions, in their feelings, in every single moment of their life up until that moment. And then that occurrence happens. Only that one can make that judgment. And you just described God. And the thing is, so when you're denying objective reality, when you're denying objectivity, you're denying the creator of objective reality and objectivity, which is God, which is the infinite creator. So I often think the biggest issue is that we don't really learn what infinity is, what an infinite creator would be. We don't think about, like, in the mode of Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan of Shalom, the way he taught it, which is like, we don't learn it from a scientific point of view. We don't learn outside of time, outside of space. We don't learn that stuff. We just say God, 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 angry old man in the sky with a beard. Like, that's the way we think about it. And it's very, it's subconsciously, because we're most of us are from Western cultures where Christianity has reigned supreme for so long, so much so that we're saying it's 2022. Like, what are we counting from? We don't even know what year it is, right? Subconsciously, we have been infiltrated to such a degree that we don't really know how big of an effect that this ideology, Christianity, first and foremost, has really had on our perspective over what God is, over what truth is, over what evil is, over who the Messiah is.
Right.
All those kinds of things. I know I just went in a lot of different places, but...
Yeah. Rabbi Kaplan points out in Jewish meditation that it's often significantly beneficial to think of God more as a principle and less as an entity. And Alan Watts talks about reverse imaging. To try to, like...
I like Alan Watts. His voice calms me down, but you're going to have to explain reverse imaging to me.
He talks about how, like, some astronaut went out to space, and when he got back, people asked him, like, did you see God? And he's like, yeah. And they're like, and he's like, she's black. And he was just trying to mess everyone's head, like you're, this is ridiculous. I think
right.
that's I think what he's trying to say. If I combine Alan Watts and Rabbi Kaplan together, that you reverse in order to negate what you originally had, and then hopefully you end up in nothing. Chapter 9 of Rabbi Kaplan, which says not to do without a guru, but it's from the nothingness that you find the something. That the chashmal in the spiritual experience, in Ma'aseh Merkavah, in like the workings of the chariot, the Jewish esoteric experience.
Right.
Rabbi Kaplan points out that divine experience is a speaking silence. Is how he translates it.
Right. And you end up seeing yourself on the throne or something
from
like
the
that.
Nothingness.
Like, you end up seeing,
that's a whole. That I haven't really.
I'm not really familiar with it, but I'm familiar with the concept, and it actually, it's kind of representative of a concept that, like, is paramount in my life, which is Yeridah L'Tzorech Aliyah, which is the idea that, it's the reason, it's how God created the world in a way, which is a lowering or a breaking for the sake of an elevation that would have never been possible without the lowering in the first place. It's kind of what you're saying, like to take a step back and make yourself nothing, and then to realize that by making yourself nothing, you're actually everything.
Right.
And that the whole universe is within you, and all these kinds of things. It's
So yeah, it's like in the esoteric and like the spiritual tradition, it's not about like knowing anything you are; it's about knowing everything you're not.
Right. And it's interesting that there was this meme I really, really liked. Maybe I could hold it up to the camera. It says, there are only two lessons. It says, you weren't seeing the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then it says, You are the whole thing.
That's
And
good.
so it's kind of So it's kind of that whole idea, which is we've been demoralized to such a point that either on one end of the spectrum, whether it's more like the rationalist atheist perspective that we're just animals, that we're just here to survive, and that there's really not anything more special than us aside from our productivity, is that we can produce more than others and we are able to
Use tools.
build civilizations. Like we're the king of the animals, will be, right? That we've been demoralized at such a point that we don't really understand our true power and what we can do. And then the other side of it is it's kind of like what we were talking about before. Is like the Christian side of it, where you're evil, right? You have evil in you, right? You're sinful, right? There's no redemption outside of the cross, right?
Well, I mean, you've heard Alan Watts on that, right?
What?
You've
No, I haven't.
never heard Alan Watts on Jesus?
No.
Oh, they're good. Alan Watts on Jesus is like, so he thinks that everyone just totally missed the message, and basically, everyone was trying to be like the Rebbe instead of understanding that he was saying is, be like me. He didn't mean be like me. He meant like find yourself. And he actually goes through like the Latin translations, and he's like, he explains how it was a total miscommunication, and it got translated wrong, either on purpose or by accident. And when Jesus was saying, whoever wants to, get to God has to come through me, he meant through the Spirit. He meant like through love.
Right, but
he meant through all these things. He didn't mean me. He wasn't in the ego state. And everyone,
I still think he was.
Again,
so,
we're gonna get into historical.
I understand
of like who he was, who he wasn't, what he did say, what he didn't say, with more
no,
than
I
one.
understand. You're right, but like I'm not even interested in going there. It's just a very simple thing. It's like we didn't need you for that. Like as Rabbi Tobias Singer talks about all the time. Like when it comes to Christianity or Yeshu and all those things, like whatever good Yeshu espoused, it was already in the Torah.
Yeah,
like,
I think he was going to the simple people. That's like officially their story. He was the Rebbe who was like the Baal Shem Tov was like dealing with the Ganavim and stuff like that.
Sure, but then there's other. I mean, I read Rabbi Aryeh's book this weekend, The Real Messiah, and he brings all these quotes from the New Testament. Now you can say I didn't say that, but I don't know. But it's not whether he said it or not isn't really the point. The point is the ideas, and we see it based off the outcome of what we're seeing, which is like everything that is true isn't new, and everything that is new isn't true. That sums up Christianity in a nutshell. Right? We don't necessarily, and Christianity is great. Like, look, like I thank God every single day that I was born a Jew, an Orthodox Jew, that I had exposure.
Like Jesus,
to any of it
he was also born an
whatsoever.
Orthodox Jew.
Right. And like me, he was turned off. Like I was very turned off growing up. But I was more turned off based off of the community of who people were, and that's kind of what he got turned off, right? He was like, oh, the Pharisees this, the Pharisees that, and he left because of that, because of the people, right? And we can get into whether he was justified or not, but the point is like we have to understand that we have to remove ourselves, and if you talk about the ego state, we have to remove the ego state from us, realize other people have their own ego states, understand that, be okay with that, don't get annoyed by their egos, because that's actually us getting in our ego, even if we don't know. And this is a very difficult thing. I'm not saying I have any experience doing this or not. It's something I try to do every day, but it's difficult. And just look at things objectively and look at things at face value. And that's why the Alphabet in particular, and I know you want to talk about this, the Alphabet in particular are so foundational. And just look at the text, look at what is said, what is seen, and that's it. Right? And then you can use your own subjective experience through it and compare your own subjective experience of the objective with other people who have their own subjective, and that's what the symbol Aleph represents. So that's what we really need to do, and by removing ourselves, as you pointed out before, removing ourselves in pursuit of something greater than ourselves, we become our best selves.
Wow. All right. So let's with that, let's get Z on the call. And let's talk more about the alphabet, about the Hebrew alphabet.
it's actually kind of funny because you came. I mean, we've been trying to. I mean, this is Yitzy's podcast, but I've been trying to like connect you guys to jump onto this for probably like 4 months now, and you came up again today. Yitzy had pulled out. I don't know if you guys mentioned this
No,
yet, but he's like, right. So with the Arizal, I think the Ben Ish Chai, you have the Tzadi, and so it's you have a Nun with the Yod on its back. And I was like, oh yeah, you should like talk to Andrew like real quick about this, like as soon as you can. This is the whole concept. It's the tzaddik is the nun of Nefila. He falls, he puts the yod of Hashem on his back, and done. It turns into a tzaddik.
Right.
And we also realize that if you go 7 steps back, because Sheva you pull tzaddik from the tzadi, you end up at lamed. So you start at a point of lamed, lomed, of learning, and you fall 7 times, and then you
Wow.
put the yod on your back. But yeah,
That's cool. I didn't know that.
yeah, that's it's funny. That's
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of my favorite ones. The lesson of the tzadi. Sorry for the editing job. But yeah, it's as Z pointed out, it is a nun and a yud. So the question comes, okay, so we have to break it down, and this comes into the alphabet in general, right? Because symbols are made up of other symbols, so it's all interconnected, and that's how you see the design within it. So for the example of a tzadi, right? People think it's actually the letter Sadiq, and it's not. It's Sadi, but we say Sadiq because in the song we go Sadiq Kuf Reish Nun Shin Taf,
yeah.
and so we think it's Sadiq when it's actually Sadi, but the Sadi represents the Sadiq. So how does the Sadi represent the Sadiq? One example is what Z just gave, that it's the Nun Nefilah, the humble servant taking the burden. That's kind of what we all do, right? I mean, in an ideal world, we understand that we have fallen into this world, and this world is fallen, but yet we carry the burden being the potential, right? Because the yud is also potential to carry the burden in order to bring righteousness and to elevate everyone and to elevate the world. But from an even more, just more direct standpoint, who does the nun represent? So the nun represents humility, right? Because the nun is on its knees, right? If you look at it, it's on its knees. And if you look at the alphabet chart, right, when it goes from Aleph to Tet 1 through 9, and then Yud to Tzadi 10 to 90, and then Kuf to the Sofiyot, the nun is on its knees this way, so kind of like an L, right? And it's bending towards, as this is a teaching of Rabbi Akiva, the next 3 symbols before it are Mem, Lamed, Chaf, because the nun is on his knees towards the Melech, right? So the it's humbling himself towards Hashem, and who's on the chair, who's before the Chaf, it's the Yud, right? Because Hashem's the king. So it's on its knees towards the king. So who in Tanakh represents humility more than anyone else? It's Moshe Rabbeinu. And another way we see that the nun is Moshe Rabbeinu is, I'm actually reading the book of Yehoshua right now. It says Yehoshua bin Nun, right? Not Ben Nun. Like what is bin? What does bin mean? And one thing I heard is that bin is not really his son. It's a protege can be looked at as the son of his mentor. And who was Yehoshua's mentor? Moshe Rabbeinu, right? So the nun is Moshe. And then if you look at the tzadi, right, you have the nun, then you have the yud, and the yud is upwards. It's almost as if it's Moshe Rabbeinu on the mountain against Amalek, holding his hands up, right, to receive. But what the tzadi is really doing, it's giving and receiving at the same time, which is what we are supposed to be doing as people, which is giving and receiving. And what's the numerical value of yud? It's 10. So it's Moshe Rabbeinu holding up the 10 commandments, right, on the mountain, and that's what a tzaddik really is, and that's what the tzaddik represents.
Wow. Can I just add a
Sure.
little drop to that? You just like triggered something
course.
when you were talking. What did
Yeah,
Moshe?
teach
What
me,
did
man.
Moshe give to Yoshua?
What did Moshe give to Yehoshua? The role of leader, right?
Vayikra Moshe leHoshea ben Nun Yehoshua. I gave him a yud.
Oh wow, that's really cool. Gave him the yud.
He gave him a yud.
Wow,
He was a bin Nun, and he tried making him a tzaddik.
wow, that's sick. Wow, yeah, exactly.
That's really-
And, the yud represents
That's
potential.
like-
He also, by the way, I'm
That-
realizing that. Yeah, also it's the 10. You have the 10 luchot, And when Moshe comes off the mountain for the first time, he's coming down with the first set of Luchot, and he meets Yoshua, and he's like, I hear like some noise in the camp, like, what's good? Yeshua's like, it sounds like they're partying. And Moshe's like, I don't think. So, but when Moshe's coming down, he sort of is almost showing Yoshua these 10 commandments. He's showing them the first. He's like, these are the first 10, little sneak preview, and then he shatters them. But he seems to give Yoshua the Yud. He gives him the 10. Kind of.
Well, we should check. Is he called Yehoshua after that, or was he Hoshea? Like
he's called Hoshea until the Meraglim. When the Meraglim go out and he gets, he's drafted to be one of the spies. Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to make sure that he didn't sin, so he gave him the Arizal. Actually has a Torah on it. I think the Arizal says it's the Yud of Levi, if that means anything to you. Basically, the Arizal says that every tribe had their emissary, had their I mean, they weren't kind of spy, had their spy that they put forward, which were the Nisiim. They were the leaders of that tribe. And he says that each tribe had, like, in the merit of their ancestor, hopefully they wouldn't sin. And there's the issue is that Yosef,
of like the tribe,
Yosef,
of the tribe, of the name of their
12
tribe,
tribes, was split into two, Menashe and Ephraim. So when the Torah says Livnei Menashe, right? It says Livnei Yosef, Livnei Menashe. It says to the tribe of Joseph, to the tribe of Menashe. And the Arizal says that Menashe got, like, that's in the zchut of Yosef, he shouldn't sin. And Hoshea ben Nun was left without any help. He was, like, devoid of any help. So Moshe Rabbeinu gave him this Yud from, like, Levi, who was Moshe Rabbeinu's tribe, that didn't go because they're not counted in the regular tribe, they're the priests. Right. That in that he calls it Besod Iber, which is like a bit of that soul should accompany you, you know? It's like a little mushu action.
Interesting. Wow. Stuff's so freaking deep, man. And this is kind of like what we were talking about before, which is like, no human made this. And to live life with an understanding that there is something on this earth that can be shown to be of divine origin, like, that is the most freeing thing in the world, right? And it's more than it's just from divine origin. The divine one is good and wants us to succeed and wants nothing more than for us to get along and treat each other with love and respect and kindness, and to bring happiness and the redemption and all of that good stuff. And that's why it's called Tavashurit.
Dude, I thought you were a Litvish.
He's heard us a billion times, so... Huh?
I thought you were Litvish. What's with all this, like, love and, like, positive energy? What yeshiva did you go to?
Well, what's Litvish? What's Litvish mean?
Like Ashkenazi.
Like, you know, like Ashkenazi, like, depressing, you know?
Right. Well, I mean, I went to Yeshiva Flatbush, which is a much more Sephardi school. Yeah, I'm a proper Jada, but it's a, but you know, again, it's about finding the balance between the two. Of course, you know, the Ashkenaz, like, very super rational, hyper rational, but also Sephardi, more right brain, more creative, more spiritual. And yeah, I mean, I've always kind of had both, which I think is important. But back to the whole idea of Tavashuri, I love this teaching. It's one of the most freeing things. Is, you know, everyone's talking about happiness, right? Everyone wants to be happy. Like, what do I want? I want to be happy. And there's one of my most favorite lines. You ever watch the show Mad Men?
Yeah.
Yes. So there's a scene where Don Draper is sitting in a meeting, and he's trying to win back a client. The client doesn't like him because they're a pharmaceutical company, and he wrote this whole thing about tobacco in the New York Times and everything, and he's trying to win them back. And he comes in and he says, I can make your business, like, flourish. He's like, and the client's like, I'm happy with my business. He goes, you're happy? You're not happy. Like, there's like, but we're getting 50% of the market. He's like, no, you want 100% of the market share. You want all of it. What is happiness? Happiness is only a moment before you think about, am I happy? Do I have enough? And happiness is fleeting, is the point. Happiness stems from the same root from the Norse, from the same root as happenstance. Happiness and happenstance stem from the same root in the Norse root hap, which means by chance, right? It means that you're not in control of your happiness. You're not in control over whether it's there or whether it's not. It just comes and goes. And, that's the world of the rationalists, of the trade, of like, oh, there are trade-offs in life. I can't always be happy. There's going to be suffering. Suffering's a part of life. And yeah, okay, yes, that's what it is now, but we should not be okay with a world like that. We should not be okay with that world. We want to bring a world where there is no more suffering. We can't be just content with, oh, okay, I have a trade-off. I'm happy here. I'm not here. I'll just be grateful. Okay, great, of course, but that's not the end goal. So how can we truly be happy in the spiritual sense of the word, of what we really mean? And that's what osher means, right? What the difference between osher and something like simcha is that, like when you say, I'm going to a simcha, right? Then the simcha is over, right? The chag is over. So are you still happy? Are you still sameach, right? So osher is not dependent on time or space. Osher, as Rabbi Moshe Shapiro points out, is from the same root for the English word assure, right? Meaning that no matter how dark it gets, no matter how depressing it gets, how anxious a situation may cause you to be, that you are assured that God is real and God is good and that God is with you, and Hashem wants you to succeed, and that you are going to succeed because you are assured that God is good and God is real. It's an inner happiness that doesn't leave you during the depressing times because it's not dependent on time. And that's what the Torah is, and that's what Tabashurit is, because you are assured that this is of divine origin, and that the lessons embedded within it are timeless and are pertinent to everyone. And if every single human being was able to look at it objectively and transcend the preconceived notions, we would bring happiness to everyone, a lasting, everlasting happiness. And that's what I'm trying to do, like, in a way. Long monologue.
Yeah. It's not just about the quantity; it's about the quality. Still processing all that.
Right. Right. No, I hear that.
Yeah, that was amazing. Just out of curiosity, because you keep saying like Ktav Ashurit, which is the current way generally we write Hebrew in all the holy scrolls and stuff like that. But there was an older script, right, of like an ancient Hebrew.
Ktav Ivri?
Ktav Ivri. Do you have anything to like what the change was, how that happened, when that happened? Do you know anything about that, like historically?
So I mean, Z's also very familiar with this. Z actually helped me write an article about this about a year and a half ago now.
We discussed this.
I don't know if he remembers.
Yeah.
So just very simply, I think before we start, I think it's very important to point out it doesn't really matter when one physically manifested. Whether if Ktav Ivri was first or Ktav Ashurit wasn't. The point is that when did it manifest in thought? And when you study Ktav Ashurit, you realize that we did it with the Sadi before, which was a drop of, which is a small amount of what I know, and what I know is like an even smaller amount of what is actually out there. So it proves itself, because the alphabet in Ktav Ashurit is the alphabet from Aleph to Mem to Taf, as it says in Masechet Shabbat, I believe, when it says the alphabet is Emet, right? Truth is merely an English word attempting to stand in for the biblical Hebrew word Emet, which is the alphabet from Aleph to Mem to Taf, which proves itself, right? Truth proves itself. And when you study it, you realize that it is true and it is from God. So in regards to when Ktav Ivri popped up, what's interesting is that the oldest known alphabet that the secular world says is that they've uncovered is called the Phoenician Alphabet, right? It ranges about somewhere around 1948 years after creation, and maybe actually no, sorry, a little after that even. After that, it's important that it's after that because I specifically said 1948 for a reason. So it came somewhere about like 3,000 years ago, a little over 3,000 years ago. And it is identical to Ktav Ivri. The Phoenician alphabet is identical to Ktav Ivri. Double check me on that, Z. I know you are right now, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Yeah, I'm checking.
Um,
Yeah.
and what that means is that who were the Phoenicians, right? People don't. Phoenician is a Greek word because people don't really know who they were, right? They've long since gone, and it's interesting because if you go to Wikipedia right now, you're talking this Phoenician alphabet, and you like scroll down and you go to the symbols, and you'll see that the one that is the second to last symbol is called tooth. What's tooth? Shin. Right? So it's like and what's the second one? It's called house. It's called house. What's house? It's bayit, it's bet. Right? So at a certain point you have to ask yourself, like, is it possible that we don't have the full picture, and what the secular world or whatever scientists have uncovered to begin with, or that we have right now, isn't the full picture, and that perhaps that we're not looking at something as niche as Judaism, right? Because even an example of this is like even sources of words, right? Something as simple as the word love, right? If you look up the source of the word love on Google, it'll tell you it's like, oh, it became love in the 14th century in Germany, and it's from Greek, and it's like, okay, so then why is love come from the heart? What's that association from? Well, it's because what helps us live, it's the heart, right? Meaning live and love come from lev. And they won't say that. They'll say it's some Greek thing, but in reality, if you truly believe the alphabet are the word of God, they are it is the first language, a language of creation itself, which you can see in many different ways, even from just the love aspect of it. The compression to ventilation ratio to CPR matches up for the numerical value of the word lev, of heart, because it's 30 compressions for lamed and bet for 2 breaths. Like, at a certain point, you have to ask yourself, have we not uncovered the truth, or is the truth being deliberately hidden? I vacillate back and forth between those two things. But it comes back to the original point. What do you say?
Andrew, you and I had discussed that conceptually, okay, say Phoenician predates, say, Abraham's usage of the alphabet, and we put it in terms of, okay, the Phoenicians have this alphabet that they're using. Abraham comes along, he begins his like getting closeness to God. If you learn Sefer Yetzirah, kind of the way that's describing him using the shapes of letters, he sort of brings them out of their galut. And we once put it similarly to that the names of the months of the year in Hebrew are actually their Babylonian terms. And so we sort of brought the months out of galut. And so it's almost as though there can also be from the other sort of viewpoint, where Avram takes the letters of his day and he goes, all right, I see how one can find the Creator via these, and he does so, and forever changes sort of their structure themselves and brings them into like that level of reality, and then ends up with what you're saying over here, which they sort of end up in a system where they cyclically can the entire system can rely on itself to stand.
Right, but the system only relies on itself in Tav Ashurit. The Phoenicians didn't have Tav Ashurit; they had Tav Ivri, which is very important.
Mm-hmm.
It's very possible. The system of the alphabet itself, that you can look at Emet in Tav Ashurit and see that it is of divine origin just by interconnecting the numbers, the shapes, the sounds, the words that are used in biblical Hebrew, and you see all these concepts interweave, and how timeless it is, and that it's impossible for a human being to have ever contained so much infinitude and such minimalism. Gotcha. And then that's God.
By the way, there's a whole teaching here that's almost like we didn't do here, simply, but if you go through each letter of the alphabet, they have a story to themselves of where each one is leading to the other, sort of leading to the creation of the next. It's hinted to an Otiot to Rabbi Akiva, and how each shape is building to the next. And so you see a system of birth, from the point of view of consciousness, given the shape of the Aleph, into the Bet, and et cetera, down the line.
Right, and even just from a very, like, you don't even have to get Kabbalistic about it. I mean, the earlier letters are more Kabbalistic, but even something from like Chet, Tet to Yud, right? Like Chet is the Chuppah, it's the Chatuna, right? Literally, if you look at the Chet, you can see that, right? It's the canopy at the wedding. It's all these things. It's the supernatural act, which is love and sex. What comes after Chet? tet, right? What is tet? Tisha meodea. Tisha meodea, tisha yarchei leda. If you look at the negative white space in the symbol tet that can only be seen in Ktav Ashurit, you will see a fetus, a baby in a womb, right? So you have marriage, then you have pregnancy. What comes after tet? You have yud. What's yud? Yud is the yeled. Yud is the yerusha, right? Yud is the inheritance. Yud is the child. Yud is the seed, right? It's the potential that is brought into the world after the pregnancy. So it goes, and this isn't some arbitrary endpoint where you begin at Chet. If you go to Zion before that and you go all the way back to Aleph, it is an entire system where it ranges from Aleph to Tav. And the way I like to describe it is Aleph is, we have Aleph just for the sake of just brevity, because Aleph is the deepest symbol. Aleph is God in a way, right? God is the unified singular whole, right?
Aluf.
That is the separation. Yeah. Aluf meaning the leader, right? The
chief,
Bet
the leader,
is the breaking, it's the division, it's the Big Bang, it's the Bereshit, it's the boom, it's when one becomes two, it's Bina, right? And then after that, right, because the Bet is closed off, right? So then Gimel is where we come in, right? More in concept. We really come in Vav, which is a whole other thing, but Gimel is in concept, like the purpose of life. Why are we here, right? The purpose of life is, as we know, is to find God, is to be godlike. Gimel Daled, which is a whole other thing. But how do we return to Aleph? We span, instead of going through Bet, we can't go through Bet because Bet is closed off. We just keep bouncing back. We can't go that way. So what do we have to do? We have to run like the Gimel, the opposite direction, right? Throughout the span of the Aleph Bet, from Gimel Daled all the way to Kuf Shin, and then at Taf then connects to the Aleph, because Taf is Teshuvah, is the Torah, is the Tefillah, right? And Taf connects to Aleph, and then that is that infinite loop, that is life, that is consciousness, that is the soul, that is all these things, and that's kind of the whole thing. It's all there. All the secrets to life are in those 22 symbols.
Wow. Can you break down the Ches a little more? Just because I was speaking to Z about it before, and I'm kind of wondering.
I think Z actually has a much better concept of it. I know he's very into the idea that it is the that it's kind of like the male reproductive organ in a way, right? That
but I think there's a part that, what I went through with Yitzy was you have the Vav and the Zayin. I'll show you the missing part that we had.
Right.
And I think you were able to fill it in. So Vav and Zayin, you have the connection between the male reproductive tract contains both reproductive and waste. Zayin being the weapon would probably refer to the reproductive. Vav would be the waste tract. Tract. I don't know. One of those. And so they're connected to each other. And yeah, Yitzy, can you fill in what was the question exactly? How does Vav represent?
My question was, he mentioned the Ches as
waste. I think that was
right.
Mm-hmm.
What I was thinking in my head, like what I was talking about Z before, is the chuppah and the chatuna. And in theory, the chuppah is wedding these two entities, right?
Right.
Now the chet is composed of two letters. In the more, I don't want to say traditional, like Bet Yosef, I believe tradition. It's two Zions that are connected in the middle, and in the Arizal, the more mystical, the Hasidim go with a Vav and a Zion. And I was wondering if that could have something to do with the duality instead of the duplicity. What would you call it?
Yeah. No, I actually think it's duality is the key, because the symbol of infinity is Aleph. Aleph is a symbol of infinity, and what is Aleph? Well, we know Aleph is two yods and a vav, right? It's one yod, is a vav, and another yod, which is numerically 26, which is the numerical value of God's infinite name. So what is Aleph showing? Aleph is showing two opposites that are in theory should be opposed to one another, but in reality are united as one in the unified whole. It's the original source of the swastika. If you look at an Aleph, it's a swastika. The swastika is really an Aleph. The Aleph predated it. It's the yin and the yang, right? That's the same thing with the yin and the yang, because what is a yud? A yud is potential. So there are two warring potentials that in theory should be against one another, but are connected with the vav. And what's the vav? Vav is a hook. Vav, the word vav means hook. The vav is the utility of the vav in language is for the word and. Andrew, ve, yetz, vizi, right? And the idea is that it connects. So it's infinite. And what is chet? What is 8? 8 is one above teva. 8 is the infinite. Infinity is 8 on its side. So what chet is showing is that it's taking these two, as you said, the duality of things, and showing that it's not really a duality, that the duality is really a unity. And maybe that's why, because that's what a wedding is, right? A wedding is such a miracle. Because the men are from Mars, women are from Venus, this whole thing, we should not be able, we do. And by taking those two forces, we create life, which is the most godlike thing that we can do, which is what the Aleph represents, which is male up here, male, the Geshem, the female of the earth, coming together, creating life. I don't know if that answered your question, but...
Yeah, I just had a thought on this. I had like a thing. I'll start from the first thing that came to mind. So you have the chuppah, like you said. And so before the chuppah, before you have the vav and the zayin come together to create chuppah, you have a vav and a zayin that are separate. So essentially, zayin being reproduction is cut off from vav. And you have sort of a person reaching out via the vav for shafa, whatever it is reaching out for. Via chuppah, these two things can be connected, and therefore the function of the zayin can come into play. Prior to this, there's just a vav, and there's no way to kind of create the letter and go on to the next, right? So you have vav and so in other words, if you go through the alphabet, gimel, daled, hey, vav, zayin, they're waiting, vav and zayin come together, now we have chet, then we create tet. So I think that works. I also had an interesting thought how this relates back to Rabbi Joel David, but I think it's beyond the scope here. But that's kind of what came to mind, if that answers even more.
So I think you just made it connect, because there's a teaching in Sefer Yetzirah, right, that a zayin is really two vavs back to back. So what really a chet is really three vavs, right? So what a chet is doing there, it's really showing what is infinity, what creates life, God, man, and woman together, all three together at once, because that's what the chuppah is, that's what the wedding is.
And yes,
yeah, so you that connect, because it's.
I wonder if it's a machlokas between three-headed chin or a four-headed chin. If that's like the
four-headed
same.
Chin.
Yeah, on the tefillin on the left side.
And the tefillin.
There's a four-headed chin.
It's like the reverse.
The right side is 3, and the left is 4, and it's supposed to be like the 4 mothers and the 3 fathers kind of thing.
Right.
Come together at 7. Which there's a whole
exactly, which is natural.
But I wonder if that's kind of like the same thing. What you're saying now is it's a vav and a zayin is 2 vavs, so it could be the idea of 3 heads or 4 heads in the positive space or the negative space, and like those kind of things.
It's chesed gevuras. You're going right left.
Oh God, dude, this is the thing, man. Like, just returning to just my own personal story. It's like having conversations like this. You know, you can't have a conversation like this about Harry Potter, right? That's what they're trying to like say. It's like, oh, it's just a story, it's a myth. This is Jordan Peterson's whole thing, right? It's like, oh, the power of myth and the power of story, and it's like, yeah, of course, but it's not just a story, right? And that's what you lose when you fall in translation, when you take Lashon HaKodesh in the original script and the original language, even into just regular Hebrew. Like, you lose all of this, and it's just so sad. And you know, like Z sent me this meme, like it spoke to me, like, because I guess he knows my struggle more than most, which is like, you know, the righteous don't complain about the ignorance in the world; they spread the light, and they don't complain about the evil. They do good and stuff like that. And like I try, but like it's just, I get so sad knowing that, like, you know, it was very easy for me. I maybe it wasn't. Maybe I'm just not being objective about it. But I feel like it was easy for me to look at something objectively, because maybe I didn't have a lot of trauma in my life, and I was able to disassociate whatever bad human beings did in the name of God from God itself, and was able to look at the objective and see for myself that, hey, like, But and I know, like, Yitz, we had a long conversation about this. It wasn't just that. Like, I had my own personal stories with God with music, right? When well, it was a coincidence that this song came on, that kind of thing, and every human being has that, I truly believe. But the hard part is sitting down and looking at something objectively. Once someone does that, the rest will do the work. It will do the system. Truth proves itself. We just have to be able to provide the environment for people to want to do that, and that making podcasts like this, like I guess it's doing, it's a credit, like, so B'ezrat Hashem, people hear this and they resonate, and it's not too above their head, and we're trying to simplify it, but I pray every day. I don't want God to be hidden anymore,
Yeah, on a certain level, just 'cause I'm a big Jordan Peterson fan. But on a certain level,
I'm too.
I think that the concept, the way he looks at it, I think is back to the Joel David Bach Sefer, Rabbi Joel David, that we bought, Z. On a certain level, I think he's taking like the philosophical ideas and the also the Jungian ideas, like the psychoanalytical ideas, and he's showing how that's all incorporated in the Bible, like in the Torah, which I think is like super fascinating. And according to the Vilna Gaons, Kabbalah again would be like a huge tikkun. And the only part that upsets me is that a lot of religious Orthodox Jews are listening to him instead of some rabbi who did that already hundreds of years ago, because this is Kabbalah. We have this all in our literature, and most people don't know it, which is probably what's going on. And of those who do, it's not in like in an English version for Westerners, probably.
Easy to understand.
Right. Right. But it's that 100% what you said. But at the same time, he's incorporating Christianity and the idea of Yeshua and sacrifice and sin and all these things that are not Jewish, that are not true. And that's why I stress so much to return to the source. There's her name's Chloe Valdary. I introduced Z to her. She's relatively famous. She's like 100,000 followers on Twitter. She does very good work in regards to like she's very into Carl Jung and stuff like that. Yeah. And she said to me why do you stress so much about that Judaism is the first, that the Torah is the first, and that it's there? And I was like, because if you're learning it outside of the source, you're not getting the clear filter. You're not seeing through the clear lens of the aspaklaria, right? The clear lens. You're seeing it through a muddy lens, and you're getting the falsehoods of whatever ideology you're looking through, whether it's through Carl Jung and psychology or through Christianity or things like that. And with that comes confusion and distortion. Like, why not just return to the original? And then at the same time, what an infinite being, right, doesn't change his mind, right? An infinite being, it's in order to prove the infinite being, as much as you can actually prove something, you have to show that infinitude can be encompassed within minimalism, and you don't need to go to a billion different places. No, it's all here. It's already all here. And everything else is just a breaking of that.
Right. So to a large extent, I think that's only a breaking in terminology and in semantics and in connection. But as far as in principle, I think basically all religious traditions, all spiritual traditions, I wouldn't say religious, are kind of, getting at the same source, like you were talking about before, that, everyone's bringing down a reality into the world. And I think if you understand the principles behind everything, and you stop focusing on the names so much, and you get a little more abstract, the concept of, there needs to be this sacrifice, or there needs to be this death in order to grow, or in order to be holy or spiritual. I mean, I can say that was. I'm gonna do something super controversial right now. Yeah. There's the nun on its knees, okay, and that's Jesus, and then he's holding the cross, and that's the Yud. It's the same thing. It's just coming from a different terminology within a different framework, saying different things.
It's not the same thing.
I think it's the same source. I think it's the same exact source, and the Jews didn't channel it correctly, and the Christians channeled it. Now, what do you do with that energy? That's a different question. Do you do mitzvahs or not? But the actual message, in its deep,
Yes, again, I
like
What it's trying to say.
esoteric message, I don't think we're really that. I think they're all rip-offs of Judaism. Yeah, he was a rabbi,
Right.
you know.
Yes, but this is the issue. But this is the issue. Yes, I agree with you. They are saying the truth, but at the same time, they are saying things that aren't true. So by saying those things that aren't true, they're distorting their message. So that's their fault. It's not like, oh, they're trying to say this and we just know. That's not what happened. They're saying things that are true and they're saying things that aren't true. And the things that aren't true then distort the things that are true.
I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that, because everyone can do that. Jews can do that too. Anyone can do that.
Oh, for sure, but I'm not talking about people. I'm talking about text.
But again, I think a lot of the fallacy, a lot of the falsehoods, a lot of what people consider not true is only in name. People are getting lost up on the faces. It's the same story,
Right, but
different faces.
it's not the same story. It's not the same story. The story of Yeshua is not the same story.
A lot of it, in my opinion, a lot of the details.
Right, but the details are
Not the whole
important.
story as a whole. I'm saying a lot of the little lessons, a lot of the lessons that he's pulling out of it. On a certain level, I don't care about how he. In other words, Jordan Peterson, as a psychoanalyst, I really care more about the messages that he's bringing out.
He's a net positive.
Less about
I
how
don't
he's
disagree. He's a net
positive.
Well, we agree on that.
Right.
I just think. Yeah,
Dude, I'm Team Jordan, bro, all the way.
I've been on
Jordan.
listen to Jordan Peterson since 2015, before like any of that stuff. Like,
You know what they say? Me Jordan, I Jordan, lo come get Jordan. That's what
they say. Well, okay. You make a T-shirt. But like the thing is, we're repeating the same thing over and over again. But the issue is, this issue remains that everything true isn't new, and everything new isn't true. And the problem is that the things that are new distort the things that are true, and that's why everything is chaotic. And we need to return to the original source. And by return to the original source,
we need to take the bones with us. We need to take Atzmut Yosef. What's Atzmut Yosef? So this book that Ziad me get, he says Yosef was the one who entered into all the know, the Egyptian, but there was a lot of there was truth there, and we need to take the truth with us. And
absolutely, of course. It's like it's the same thing. Me and Z talk about this a lot in just regards to technology. Like, you need to take, we don't like the status quo. But we have to understand that we have to work within the status quo in order to transform it, right? We can't just shoot people into space and start saying things that no one's going to understand. No, we have to speak the language, right? We have to, as much as English is distorting and it creates such confusion. If I started speaking Swahili, like, to an English-speaking audience, like, no one would understand what I'm saying. So we have to work within the framework that is given to us. But that doesn't mean we have to be like the entire framework is correct. No, because the whole point is that we're trying to transform the framework. We're not trying to destroy it, right? That's the difference.
You can't change the system by fitting into it.
Right, exactly. So it's as usual. It's the Aleph. It's about balance. It's about understanding that we have to work within the system and take the good that the system wasn't the source of the good, but whatever was able to be derived, whatever the system was able to derive from the ultimate source, to use that good, regardless of if people think that originally it's from the system itself and not the source, because eventually people will realize, once they see the source, that it is all the Torah, it is all already there, and that whatever they thought was true because of science or because of Christianity or because of this, they'll see that it's already there. And
this is like Yashan and Chadash.
Yashan.
I was thinking Sassan and Simcha.
Yeah, Yashan, in regards to that, there's that as well. It's like, you can't eat the grain that was planted post-Pesach until Shavuot. That's sort of very interesting. And then it converts itself from being Chadash into being Yashan.
I'm not super familiar with that concept.
So, so it's a concept of grain. Post-Pesach, you have to wait until Shavuot for any grain planted after Pesach until you can, or really reaped
harvested
after Pesach until you can harvest it, until you can eat it, which is sort of the concept here, where everything has to go through the process of Sfira, of counting the days, until we reach the level of where the Torah is given, and then it goes from being this Chadash, this what's new isn't true, until like, okay, now that we've linked this back to the old, it sort of has this refresh of being part of this like Yashan,
Right.
post-Torah being handed down, which is interesting. It kind of follows
Right.
through an interesting
Right.
way.
You see it from a new perspective. Right.
Yeah.
It retroactively fits it in. Right. I get that. I'm gonna have to go in 10 minutes, guys.
Same. I have the exact
Um,
same. I have a heart out.
All
Yeah.
right. Is there any specific, I guess, any specific teaching from the letters that you would like want to give over more than than all the
Yes.
ones you already did? Because that was a lot of
there's
Torah
one.
in there.
There's one in particular, and we kind of quickly touched on it. It's the lesson of Gimel Dalet. So I truly believe that all the chaos we see in the world today, political, social, economic, whatever it is, it all stems from the same root, which is the crisis of meaning. That people don't they don't know what their purpose in life is, right? And we all have this God-shaped hole in our heart, and Christian. The first 2,000 years, it was the Torah, right? First it was paganism. Then once the Torah became monotheism, filled that hole. But then Christianity becomes the monotheistic standard in the world, right? So that's supposed to fill the hole in the heart. But for many, it doesn't fill that hole in the heart. So what happens? People then go to science, right? They go to science because, we live in a world where the living standards are higher than they've ever been before, and that's a great deal to do with technology and scientific advancement. But the problem with science is that it can't tell you the answers to why things are. It can tell you the how things are in regards to creation and spirituality and things like that. I give a quick parable about this whenever I give this whole spiel, which is I was on a beach with a friend of mine and a couple of friends, and they were atheists, and I'm looking at this. I was on a beach at a Fish concert, and seeing at
AC?
an AC, exactly.
Yeah.
Seeing that the sky is blue and the water is blue. It's like, oh guys, why is the sky blue and why is the water blue? And it's something I do with my more atheist friends now. Even though if I already kind of know the answer, I ask just to see what goes on. And they're like, oh, it's probably something to do with the sun or the rays or whatever. So they look it up, and it's like, oh, it's because the sun's rays reflect off the water, which makes the sky blue, or is it the opposite, like the rays and the sky's blue makes the water blue? One or the other. The point is, it's something to do with the sun. So then I said, oh, that's super interesting because the word shamayim is shamyam. And it's like, oh, what do you mean? It has something to do with the sun. And I said, if I asked you the same question, how is it that the sky is blue and the water is blue, you would give me the same answer. There's no difference between how and why in your world, right? And that's why the word for why in Hebrew is lama, is because it's a lema. For what? Why are we here? For what? Right? And science doesn't give that answer. So then people go to these political realms, whether it's the MAGA, Trump world, or they go to woke world, and this is why we live on this planet. But the real answer is embedded in the alphabet, which is the symbols Gimel and Dalet. So, for brevity's sake, as again, Aleph would be God, Bet is the creation of the world, right? So the first natural question someone would ask the creator of the world is, why? Why'd you create the world, right? So the answer is, of course, as Z was saying before, because it's a whole system. You have Aleph, God, Bet, creation, Gimel, Dalet is why. So the answer the kids say in the Masechet Shabbat when they're going through the alphabet, Gimel Dalet represents Gimul Dalim, to fill in those that lack, right? And if you look at the Gimel and the Dalet and their relationship, and it represents, as the Rambam says, the highest form of charity. The Gimel has its hand out and its leg out and it's running towards the Dalet, who is turned away from the Gimel. The Dalet does not see the Gimel, right? But the Gimel is running after the Dalet. The Gimel is composed of a Zayin and a Yud, Inktav Ashurit. Clearly a Zayin with a slanted Vav, with a slanted stem, and then a Yud, which is numerically 17, which is the numerical value of the word Tov, for goodness. The Gimel is running to give out of the goodness of its own heart. And it is giving what? It is giving a Yud, right? So the Zayin is a sustainer, and it's giving the Yud, the potential, to the Dalet. What does the Dalet do? The Dalet takes the Yud, and it becomes a Hey, right? So the purpose of life is to be God-like, is Gimel Daled, right? Is to help one another, is to lend a helping hand. And what is the most God-like thing human beings can do? Create life. And Gimel Daled is the same thing, creating life. Why? Zion, the Gimel, which is a Zion, right, which can be looked at as a male reproductive organ, and the Yud, right, which is the seed, right, which is the Gimel, which is numerically 3, which is the 3 Avot, right? It's giving the Yud to the Daled, which represents the feminine, the 4 corners of the earth, the 4 seasons, the 4 elements, the 4 mothers, right? Gives the Yud to the Daled. And what does the Daled do? The Daled takes the Yud, becomes a Hey, and the Yud turns upside down, like a baby coming out of the womb, head first. The purpose of life as allegorical to the creation of life, which is to give and to sustain and to nurture and to care and to fill in those that lack. It's the purpose of life is to give and to receive, but then the receiver then gives off more than she was given. And the cycle continues and the cycle continues, and their parents give to their kids better than they had it, and those kids give to their kids better than they had it, and so on and so forth until the coming of Mashiach. And that is the purpose of life. That was one of the most when I first learned that lesson, I was like, bro, because like we live in a world where sex is looked at in such a disgusting way, either from a secular world where it's just like live and let live, do whatever you want, treat sex like you're an animal, or from the Christian view where sex is dirty. It's like, no, it's neither of those things. It's the balance between those two. And that's what the Gimel Daled shows, the purpose of life. And that leads to Hey, which is nature, it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah. I feel like the sex ed will have to wait for another episode, you know? But but I feel like, honestly, the Jewish relationship to sex could probably be like a couple hours long. Just like what happened there.
Yeah. Big time. It's the answer, man. I mean, the thing with the most potential, which is sex, could also be the most destructive. And that's what we're seeing in today's day and age. We're seeing that. But it's a topic for another time, as you mentioned.
Yeah. All right.
Everybody sees Z typing away.
Yeah, I just dropped you, and I dropped in the chat. I have a heart out like right now. Like, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, me too.
Guys, thank you so much. Right. Andrew,
thank you.
Absolute pleasure.
I'll leave the tab open. So it uploads for you.
I'd love to maybe try this again sometime. And
Bezrat Hashem, dude.
Looking forward to seeing you again in person someday. If you ever come to Israel, bro, hit me up.
I gotta be out there, man.
Whenever you come out. Looking forward doing one in person.
Yes, amen. All right, bro.
Amen. Toda. Thanks.
Hey, guys.